Asha, how are you?
Good, how's it going?
Great. Thank you so much for joining me here today. Welcome to the Superhuman Life.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I mean, I don't know if excited is the right word based upon, the topic of the conversation, but just really, really grateful to have you here today. And I think the first thing that I need to do before we really jump into your story and everything, that really the meat of the conversation is I need to make an apology, personal apology to you. So
Ooh,
um,
goodness.
in preparing for this episode, I realized that it was almost exactly a year ago when I came onto your work for the first time. You were with a mutual friend of ours, Brian, on a podcast. And at that time, it was probably the first time I'd heard about this issue, in real, the real issue out there. And I knew then that I needed to do something. Like it hit me almost immediately. Like I needed to do something. So obviously I didn't immediately. And I think that's where the apology comes from. And I say that, truly from my heart, because as I prepared for this and after, speaking with you a few weeks ago, like I'm shocked at what we're going to talk about here today. And I think people need to be aware of this, but I think it's important to address this because, we're going to get a couple different reactions from today's conversation. People are going to read the title of the show and completely avoid clicking on it. Some people are going to click on it and they're going to hear the first 5 minutes and then they're going to run away because they're scared of it. Some people are going to listen all the way through the end and get really fired up and then post something on Facebook, and then tomorrow they're going to forget about it. But the ones that I really want to speak to are the ones that are going to hear this, are going to feel convicted to do something, and then actually take action and begin to do something. And I think that's where I ultimately want to get this conversation to at the end is where can we get people to join the fight, and just join whatever organization out there that they can. So that's my entry point into this.
Well, I appreciate that. I think that a lot of that is also the responsibility of the people that are in the movement is being responsible with our social messaging, because if we aren't careful with how we're delivering the message, it does render people feeling very overwhelmed, just kind of powerless. This is such a horrible, big thing. And so we don't want to do that. We want to make sure that by the end of this talk that everybody leaves here knowing that they can all do something, no matter how small they think it is, and they have no idea what the impact of that one tiny action could be. So we want to make sure that we speak to those people.
Yeah, and that's why I'm so excited to have you, and I'm really gonna hand this off to you here and really make give you the reins here, because I'm here and I'm fired up and I'm like, we got to do something, but like I don't like there's a lot that I still don't know. So I'm here today to learn more for myself, but obviously educate others. And I think the best place to probably start is why? Like why Natasha? Like what led you to get involved in this type of work? Because like you said, it's something that so many people run from. It is such a sensitive topic. So what was it, I know it's been a decade or so in all the incredible, work that you've done here in the Tampa Bay area and globally. But where did it all really start for you? Because I know you weren't dreaming about, being an advocate for child slavery when you were
No, I was not. It
growing
was
up in
not
South
on my
Africa.
radar. Yeah.
Yeah. So where did all this kind of, unfold and, like what was the genesis of, creating this organization and doing the work that you're doing now?
So I was actually in finance. If anyone's heard me speak before, I was in finance and doing what I always wanted to do. And once I arrived at this point, so I'm at the company that I want to be in. I'm one of very few, advisors there that are as young as I am. I'm one of very few women. And so I remember just sitting in my office being like, man, this is it. This is it. This is pretty horrible. I don't feel that good about this. And and I would pray frequently, and just, and just kind of feeling guilty, like, God, why do I feel so miserable inside? In South Africa, you grow up around a lot of need. And when I moved to America, I think I got kind of away from that a little bit. That you have this weird preconceived notion, I think, that you'll move to America and it's a first world country and there's just no problems there, And so I decided to just go back to volunteering in the community, which I'm sure most people listening are doing some kind of volunteer work. And I went to a community alliance meeting, which I highly encourage everyone to go to if you live in Hillsborough County. They're the second Tuesday of every month. And it's all of our child welfare stakeholders that are present in these meetings. And so you get a good general idea of what's going on in child welfare and all these things. And so I was sitting in this meeting, just listening.
Now, real quick, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we have a global audience.
Oh, okay.
50 plus countries we've been in, every state within the U.S. We'll link up the local stuff here for Hillsborough County, but are these type of, organizations pretty much in every major city? I
would hope so. So there's got to be sort of a central hub wherever you live, whatever country you're in, whatever state you're in. There should be a central hub that can sort of give you a general overview. And it's a whole bunch of organizations that essentially come together to address different issues that are going on.
Okay. So, and yeah, guys, we'll make sure to give you, obviously contact and stuff at the end of, the episode here where you can link up, you can find more. But yeah, I think, what she's saying here is if you're not already getting involved, the best place is just seek out and find, what organizations and what is being done in your city. So sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No, that's okay. So for me, it was interesting because I wasn't focused on one specific area. So if you have people that are already focused on homelessness or, sexual abuse or what have you, that's great. I wasn't focused on any specific area. And so I went to this meeting and was just there to learn. And in the meeting, they were talking about child prostitutes. And it was such an oxymoron to me, but no one in the room seemed to even pay attention to the terminology. And so I just raised my hand and I said, how old do children have to be to consent? Because maybe I didn't know. And so they said 18. And so I was like, okay, so if children can't consent, how can they be prostitutes? And so, listening some more, I said, what do you guys do with child prostitutes? And they looked at me like I was nutso. And they said, well, what do you mean? Prostitution's illegal. And so we arrest them, which was blowing my mind, these responses, right? And so.
What year was this?
This was in 2008. So this is a long time ago. This is 12 years ago now. And so sitting in there, I said, I just want to make sure that when I leave you, I'm not going to make up any rumors, but I just want to see if I have this right. A child that is being raped repeatedly, because we've established that there's no such thing as consent. So a child that's being raped repeatedly, when they think a law enforcement officer is there to help them, they are there to arrest them. Like, I just want to be sure that this is what I'm hearing, And they kind of were like, well, yeah, prostitution's illegal. And so the last question that I asked was, what if this was a foreign child? And then they said, well, that's different. That's trafficking. And this kind of blew my mind, obviously, because there was this misconception that for children to be trafficked, it had to be across borders. They had to be from a third world country. And I'm thinking, this is trafficking. When kids are being forced to have sex for money that they aren't getting, that is trafficking. It doesn't matter where it's happening. And so kind of like you in the beginning of this podcast said, man, I heard this a year ago. And I didn't really get involved. I didn't know how to get involved either because I'm in finance. What am I going to do? And so I went to all these organizations that were already working with children, and I said, do you guys know about this? And so they said, yeah, but prostitution's illegal. And so
that was everybody's response. It's like, yeah, we know this is going on, but it's illegal.
Right. I'm like, kids are getting raped. Prostitution's illegal. And so I just started doing research, and sort of at the same time, feeling very led to do something about this. And the more kind of I'm getting sort of tapped on the shoulder, like, hey, the more, I'm just like, what am I supposed to do about this? I don't know anything about this stuff. And so after lots of sort of arm wrestling with God, because a lot of that went on for a while, I started Redefining Refuge as a purely awareness-driven organization. So I got a book, Nonprofit for Dummies, legit, from Barnes & Nobles, figured out how to do a 501c3 and said, okay, we're going to do this and we're going to start a public awareness campaign. And that's all that our focus was on a public awareness campaign to tell people, look, this is a problem in America. Kids are being bought and sold every single day. And that's how it started. So I had no plan whatsoever, as you can see.
So this is 2008. You start bringing awareness. Is this,
So 2008, when I first hear about it, I don't actually start Redefining Refuge until 2010. So it took you a year. It took me 2.
Well, I haven't done anything yet except invite you to have a conversation about it. So
doing something now.
So what is the early stages of awareness? Is this 2010, like, I don't even think Instagram exists. So you're obviously not like going posting socially. Are you organizing events, or are you going into schools and businesses and just speaking, or what is the early days kind of look like?
Early days were absolutely just so disheartening. Our message wasn't received well. No one wanted to hear anything about this. So we live in a city where tourism is a big deal. And so my first sort of taste of what I was doing, we had a little Facebook page. So Facebook was around back then. We had a little Facebook page, and the article on the Facebook page was saying that Tampa was one of the worst places for quote unquote forced prostitution of children. And I remember
so they were actually using that word, forced prostitution.
One organization, a much larger organization, a national organization that we ended up we ended up partnering with, they had done this study. And so there was one organization saying, yeah, this is a problem in this area, which was so wonderful for me, not feeling alone, And so we took some of the information from the study and posted it. And I remember getting a phone call from one of our city officials saying, hey, can you please take this article down? Because they had just had an article come out that same week that said that Tampa, where we live, was one of the safest places for children. So you can see how this narrative, it became a very, very contentious narrative, and no one wanted anything to do with it for a long time. Yeah, for a long time.
Long time. Like when do you feel the pendulum kind of swung to where it was starting to get accepted?
So our first sort of awareness campaigns were in 2010. So now we're actively talking about this. This is human trafficking. This is not prostitution. We need to reframe this. And at the time, just to give you guys an idea of how much has changed in a short time, at the time, I only found 2 other organizations in America that were kind of on the same bandwagon of trying to reframe child prostitution as trafficking. So there were very few of them back then. Today, there's over 12,000 or 13,000, something ridiculous. So a lot has changed. But one of the organizations was very much on this bandwagon, were a lot more politically connected, if you want to call it that. And they had drafted some legislation that was, advocating for this issue to be reframed as a criminalization, sort of a juvenile delinquency issue, to an actual issue of a child being a victim. And so we kind of, joined forces, made lots and lots of noise. And by the end of 2012, beginning of 2013, Florida, our state, became a safe harbor act, or a safe harbor state, which means that children should not be arrested for the act of prostitution, but be taken to a safe place. And oddly enough, when this law first was implemented, we were still a discretionary state. So law enforcement could essentially decide, are we arresting this child or are we taking them to a safe place? Which is no longer the case. It's against the law now to arrest. But yeah, it took a long time, 2 years of making noise, essentially.
Awareness. I want to maybe kind of go back here and maybe define some of the terminology that we're going to be using here. And
Right.
I'm gonna let you do this. So when we talk child trafficking or sex trafficking or trafficking in general or sex slavery, I mean, I see the words as really being synonymous with each other, like across all of this. Is that the way that it's viewed politically, or are there different kind of segments in terms of a slave versus just a trafficked individual, or how do you kind of define it for people?
So that's actually a great question. With minors, it's a little bit different. So for children, if you are under the age of 18 and you are having sex in exchange for anything of value, that's considered trafficking. So if you are having sex because you need a sandwich and somebody's exploiting that vulnerability, that's a trafficking situation. In fact, if everybody could think about trafficking as the exploitation of vulnerability, that's the most wonderful global definition that I think I've ever heard, is the exploitation of vulnerability. If I can figure out what your vulnerability is, it's very easy for me to exploit you. And with children, they get sexually exploited. And sometimes it's not just for trafficking, trafficking meaning forced prostitution, but it can be for pornography. It can be for strip clubs. It can be for film. It can be for all kinds of different things. So it doesn't necessarily have to be the act of sex.
Yeah, I'm so glad you went there, and here we are. I think we're 10 minutes or into this already, and we're off the outline. But I think we need to address it here. The pornography. I think somewhere between 30 to 40% of Pornhub is user generated content. So meaning that it's not these big production studios. It's just regular individuals that are putting the content out there. So from what you're saying, if a boyfriend, I mean, I'm just throwing an example out here. Like if a boyfriend is having sex or just two individuals are having sex and one person videotapes it and then uploads that to a site, that's trafficking.
Oh yeah. I mean, well, so here's the thing. If the person is a minor, then absolutely. And they're making any kind of money off of that, then yeah. They're certainly being exploited. I don't know if anyone knows this, but a few years ago, I'm not even sure if this is still accurate. I'm sure it's just worse now. But teen porn was the most Googled thing on the internet. Teen porn, amateur porn. And so a lot of this is prepubescent girls, right? Last year, statistically, there were over 45 million images, child porn images of children that were found online, over 45 million. And so obviously pornography is perpetuating our problem. People are only going to watch it for so long before they go and actually do it, And so we've seen undercover footage of people negotiating a price, and the younger they say the child is, the more money they're willing to pay. So.
Yeah, I've heard Tim Ballard, Operation Underground Railroad, speak, pretty extensively on this, and not just what you just shared there, but relating it back to the porn. Like every time they arrest one of these traffickers and they ask them why, what led you to here, they all link it back to when I was a young boy, I saw Playboy for the first time, and then I got into internet porn, and then the regular internet porn no longer was doing the job, so I started to explore some other these more hardcore porns, which led me down this rabbit hole of teen porn, and then eventually the child teens get younger and younger, then you get into children, and then the children porn even stops working. So the only place you have to go is the next step would be child sex. I mean, it's horrific to even think and speak it, but I definitely
want. It's very intentional. You know what I mean? People think that it's not intentional, but it is intentional. If you look at just the trend in pornography in general, It's getting younger and younger and younger. It's scenes are becoming more and more pedophilic. And so these are trends that are happening.
You shared something when we were at lunch about what these companies are doing and how they're flashing things and certain scenes there. If you can just share that here, because I was thinking about it after our conversation, and I know a lot of our audience is in the same kind of age demographic, 37. So I don't know if you guys had Saved by the Bell in South Africa, but growing up, like
staple America. Oh my!
It was like, growing up, in elementary and middle school, it's like your afternoon was like 2 hours of Saved by the Bell. Kelly Kapowski, Zach Morris, they did an entire episode I can remember on this type of advertising where companies would flash certain products, like in a movie theater. And you see it in movie theaters nowadays. But share what you shared with me at lunch, that how some of these companies are utilizing certain things and scenes to help bring people to that younger.
Right. So, one of the things that I certainly wasn't aware of this ever, is that massive producers of pornography, or these large hubs and website hosts and what have you, some of the biggest individuals on their payroll are psychologists. So whenever people have psychologists on their payroll, you have to wonder why. So why are they employing people that are very skilled at knowing how the mind works? So that's concerning. But what I learned was, a lot of the time in pornography, they've been able to kind of time these scenes to where they can more or less tell when someone's going to climax, and then they'll insert an image of a prepubescent child, or a prepubescent child, really, or just something childlike. And so what happens is, in our brains, it's a simple concept, really. What fires together wires together. And these are how little brain maps are formed in our brain. And so your brain, it's a very normal physiological response for your brain to think that that is why it associates that image with that dopamine. And so even though that image had nothing to do with that dopamine, now this is a brain map in your brain. And this is what happens. It's very, very, very intense, and it's sick. It's purely sick, but it's very intentional. They've actually done some studies on this if people are curious. I'm not sure if you saw, I forget the guy's name now, but the one that did the study with the mice, where they had male mice and female mice, and the female mice were, on heat or whatever, but they covered them in, I don't know if it was like rotting flesh or something absolutely putrid, where normally if you have this absolutely putrid, awful, horrible smell, male mice would run away. But because their natural and instinctual drive to mate is so high when the females were on heat, they did it anyway, despite this putrid, terrible smell that was on the females. And then they started putting this putrid, horrible smell on food and all these things. And just that one time was enough association for those little mice. One time of that. And so it's the same thing with these psychologists in porn, the producers of pornography. They know how the mind works. They know how to easily condition your mind. And it can take one time, literally one time.
Yeah, the timing of this conversation, guys, it's not by chance. So if you haven't yet done so, go back and listen to the episode prior to this, episode 42, where I break down a different documentary. It's a social dilemma, but we talk a lot about these tech companies, how they're utilizing exactly what Natasha said. They have neuroscientists, psychologists on staff, and then they're taking this information from these doctors, and then they're working alongside these engineers to build these algorithms. And Pornhub, they're utilizing the same type of persuasion technology that companies like Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, all these social media sites, they know what you're going to want before you even know it. So they're able to lead you down a path. And I'm just so.
And that is the goal, right? The goal is to know what you want before you even want it.
Well, absolutely, because nobody's paying for pornography anymore. So how are these companies actually going to make money? They're going to make money by keeping you on their site as long as possible, and that's where the advertising dollars are going to come in. So understanding, I shared this last week. Like, if you're not paying for a service, realize you're the product. And I think just having a higher level of awareness of how you're being used. It's just shocking.
I think we talked about this too, and I never thought about this until I started doing the work. But there's two kinds of people that you meet, and you meet people that are absolutely anti-prostitution, right? So if we said to our general audience, how many of you would be pro-prostitution, and how many of you think we should legalize prostitution? The overwhelming majority say absolutely not. But then if we ask the same question, how many of you potentially watch pornography? An overwhelming majority of people generally watch it. And then if you pose the question of pornography is filmed prostitution, they're like, whoa, you know what I mean? And I don't think that we think of it in those terms, but even though you're not paying for the pornography, those people potentially are being paid or being exploited to do it in the first place. So just think about what you're watching. It's hardly ever consensual. And like, oh yeah, this is great. Let's do this.
Yeah. Wow. So people are they're gonna hear this, and this exploitation and kids being sold and trafficked, and they're thinking like, yeah, this is, I understand it, Natasha, but this isn't our problem. This is a problem, in third world country, or this is a problem, outside of the US. Can you share, with the listeners, like some real US based statistics on what is actually occurring here, like right in our own backyard?
So I'll tell you that in the 10 years of us offering services to kids, we've never had a foreign national child in our program. All of our kids were born and raised in the United States. And so a lot of what goes on, people see the movie Taken and they think kids are getting snatched and grabbed and all these things. Less than 1% of cases statistically are abduction related cases. So I'm going to say that again. Less than 1% of cases of child trafficking in the United States are abduction related cases. And so we see a lot of parents that are very fearful that their kids are going to get stolen out of the, Target in the middle of the day, or whatever the case is. But does it happen? Sure, but very infrequently. So what happens more? What happens more is we see familial sex trafficking. Substance abuse is not a new problem. Substance abuse is a problem that I think that everybody in the world has acknowledged. And so when we have parents that have substance abuse problems, they traffic their own children. Which is the interesting thing. If mom starts out, exploiting herself or her drug of choice, mom quickly learns, or dad, that people will pay more money for their children. So again, the demand's there, right? This is happening a lot. 50% of our cases are familial sex trafficking cases. So mom, dad, a primary caregiver is selling their own child to support a substance abuse habit very frequently. And then our other cases are the sort of textbook boyfriend cases, right? Or girlfriend cases. Don't think for a second that only men are the perpetrators. Yeah. We have females that are traffickers and we have females that are buyers. So we have obviously just imbalance of power in general. And if I figure out what your vulnerability is, I can potentially exploit you. And so ask yourself as an adult, do you have a vulnerability? I mean, yeah, I think we all have vulnerabilities. And so it's just, people exploiting those vulnerabilities and knowing how.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. Who's purchasing these kids? You said like, a parent will, if a mom is, selling herself, she's quickly going to realize like she's going to get, 2-3 times more for a child. Who's out there buying kids?
Gosh, I mean, honestly, we've seen it all. We've seen pastors, teachers, pediatricians, attorneys, athletes, social workers, law enforcement. I mean, this is not something that discriminates. So here's the thing. People are inclined to believe that, little Joe Schmo down the road is the one that's paying for sex with kids. Well, they can't afford it. So my question always is, when people say who's buying sex from kids, I'm going to say who can afford it.
How much is a child?
I mean, it depends. I mean, it can be $200. It can be, we've seen horrible things. Some of our kids where it'll be $25 for a 15-minute encounter of your choice at times. But generally, it's more expensive for children. So, I mean, we even have kids, believe it or not, in the United States of America, we have kids whose traffickers tattoo QR codes onto them, and you can scan your phone, you can hold your iPhone up to them, and you can know how much they cost from a tattoo. I mean, this is real. This is happening.
And I know in other parts of the country, like, you know, in some of these third world countries, like it happens right out there, you know,
Right.
on the street corners. But here, you know, like you're not going through a drive-through, or, you know, so where is this even occurring?
Oh my gosh, hotels, motels, people's homes, private residences. I mean, we've had kids tell us all kinds of stories. We've had kids, obviously, with this is happening inside of their homes, but a lot of it's hotels and motels. There's plenty of hotels and motels in our area that have been where we've recovered children from. So, yeah, it can happen anyway. I mean, it can happen in a car, for goodness sakes. I mean, this is the story of many of our children as well. So,
What role is social media and technology playing in victims, you know, being contacted, and how are traffickers using some of these technologies as a way to build a relationship with kids, or, you know, like as an entry point? Because like you said, it's not what we saw on Taken. You know, there's not these operations where, you know, they're you know, stealing them. It's happening right underneath our nose. But what role is like technology and social media playing for the traffickers to get in touch with kids?
So, I mean, technology is just not our friend when it comes to kids. And I hate to say it that way, but it's just absolutely true. So if you have a child that is on social media, be on exceptionally high alert, because we personally go into schools and we're teaching all about social media all of the time. And I've never had a student tell me that someone that they didn't know approached them on social media. So even if you are doing all the right things with your kids, their profile picture is not of their face, their screen name is not their real name, their profile is private, they only have friends, it doesn't mean that somebody can't message your child. I don't have to be friends with your child to message your child. And so this is what happens a lot of the time. I have a friend who's been in social work for 20 years, preaching all the things, you know, and her daughter still was having a conversation with someone that the mom didn't know. And so, here's the thing with parents, they're super hard on themselves because they don't know what to do. But we weren't raised in this technology era, right? Like, your mom didn't have to compete with Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and all these things and Snapchat, and neither did mine. Parents are now having to raise and parent children in this era of technology. Kids want technology because their friends have technology. And so if your children are going to have it, it has to be heavily monitored. I mean, because I promise you, it's a matter of time. Somebody will contact your daughter or your son. We've had children locally, one time they posted, "I'm so mad at my mom." And little trafficker was on the internet being like, "Oh my gosh, I'm sorry that you're mad at your mom. I'm mad at my mom too," and was pretending to be a 15-year-old boy. "Why don't you meet me in the park and, you know, we'll go get an ice cream?" And then she goes, and obviously it's not a 15-year-old boy. So again, it's just, social media is dangerous. I know kids want to have it, but it's dangerous. And if your kids are on social media, please be heavily monitoring their social media. I hope that you know more about their social media than they know, because that's the problem, right? Kids know more than their parents know about technology, and they know more than their parents know about social media, and that's dangerous. So
just yesterday, I was on a coaching call with one of my clients, and where he's coming towards the end. We have a 4-month program that these guys go through. So like he's fired up. He's just had, I mean, we've transformed his life. Like we've really revitalized his marriage. Like, we've given him so much confidence, and it's just amazing. And he spent the weekend away with his family. He's got 5 kids, and he's sharing me a story. He's like, Frank, I don't know what to do here. He's like, I walked in, he's got a 15-year-old son. So he walked into the room, and like the son is, on the phone, and the minute the door opens, he sees the son kind of like go to hide the phone, and he's like, hey, what's going on? What are you hiding from me? So he ends up getting the phone from the kid, and he's going back, and he's in like a direct message conversation with just a stranger on social media. So he scrolls up, and he sees, like, 15 minutes ago in the conversation, the person who was pretending to be like a 15-year-old kid is asking him, like, oh, how old are you? And they're exchanging like all this kind of personal information. And I mean, I'd been aware of this, obviously, because of in preparation for the conversation today, but it was just like seeing it in, like, I mean, one degree of, like real time, like a guy that I'm, closely in relationship with, like it happened to his kid. And I just had to, like, I had to pause, and I was like, oh my God, I never thought like this was going to be a part of, my coaching with you, but I needed to bring, to light some of the things that I've uncovered. And he's really looking forward to hearing this conversation. So,
one of the things that I think that parents need to think about too is, and we didn't have to compete with this, our self-esteem was not tied to how many likes we had and how many followers we had and how many, that wasn't an issue when we were growing up. With kids now, their self-esteems are so directly tied to how many likes they have, how many followers they have, that they will pretty much allow anyone to like and anyone to follow. And when somebody engages them in conversation, they're happy to talk. And
so excited. Yeah.
Talk, yeah. Just talk to your kids. And if your kids have iTunes, I have to make this plug, but if your kids have iTunes, please make sure that it's connected to your iTunes so that if they attempt to download an app, you will be notified immediately. Because a lot of kids, they can change the icons on the apps. So you might look at your kid's phone and think, oh, they just have, Instagram, but it could be an entirely different app because they changed the face of the app. So you would know that if you're connected to the iTunes.
Wow, it's just pretty easy to get set up. I'm not an Apple user, so I don't know anything about iTunes or Apple. Is that pretty easy for people?
Super easy to set up. And I think a lot of parents also, they're so worried about respecting the privacy of their kids. Like, I could go on and on about this. But again, remember the era that we grew up in. My dad was like, if you slam your door one more time, Missy, I'm taking the door off the hinges. And I slammed the door one more time. And guess what? I came home from school and had no door. You know what I mean? So we do if we live in our parents' houses, we're under the age of 18. Privacy is to a degree, but not to the point where it can potentially put your child at risk because you don't want to invade their cell phone.
Yeah, I always find myself conflicted when it comes to not telling people how to parent, but just giving parental advice. And I always, I go back and forth with my sister all the time. And I mean, I don't have kids, so I'm not, living this as you are. But if anything, I think with, what Natasha is sharing here, it's realizing that it's not something you're gonna run away from. You got to get on the forefront of it. You got to have the conversations. And yeah, it is your house. You got to take some parental control. And if you don't do that, I mean, your chances of really
and
connecting.
In worst case scenario, your kids hate you for 5 minutes. How many of us hated our parents? Like, not for that long. We just, for whatever, you wouldn't let me go stay the night at my friend's. I hate you. And so we all got over it.
And then they wake up the next day and it's like, I love you, Mom.
Yeah, exactly. So it's going to be fine. But again, we see so many parents on the other side of the coin saying, man, I wish that I would have just done these simple things because this potentially would not have happened if I did. So yeah, social media.
Yeah.
Wish that I could tell kids not to have it, but they all are going to have it. So it's being responsible with it.
And maybe I'm going to cross the line here, and that's okay because it's my show and I can do whatever I want. But going back to the parents, like if you're going to go have these type of conversations and you're really going to, combat this in your own home, going back to the understanding that trafficking and the porn industry are not separate entities. They're one and of the same of the sexual and exploitation trade. If you're a father and you're going to go have a conversation with your daughter about something on her social media and warning her of these signs, you're going to go have a conversation with your son about his use of social media and you know, things that he needs to be on the lookout for. But behind the scenes, you walk away, and then 2 hours later, you're sitting in front of your computer watching porn. Chances are the conversation you just tried to have is not going to resonate, because they're going to see through your lack of authenticity with them. So I would challenge you as a father or a mother, like, you clean up your own room first, but just something I thought I should share there. So we're talking about kids here with, you know, social media. So these are 10, 12 teenage kids. But based on what I've heard and read and, you know, witnessed in the past few weeks with getting prepared for this, like, it's not just the older kids. Like, what are the actual ages of kids and
So here's the problem. I think that we're still at the point where we're very reactive in our approach when we should be more proactive. So we are reacting to a problem when really we should be proactive, because what you tend to see is, and we've had hundreds of kids in our program now, I've not seen a single child that was not sexually abused when they were very small. So human trafficking generally is a byproduct of a lot of other things that are going wrong. So domestic violence, substance abuse, but all children have this critical moment, and then we didn't intervene in this critical moment. And so that's what's happening. A lot of the time, I've seen very few cases personally of very small children being trafficked. I think we've had 4 cases actually, of the children being under 10 years old. So one was a 4-year-old, and then we had 3 different ones that were 9 years old, which a 9-year-old born and raised in the state of Florida, HIV positive, and actively addicted to crack cocaine, and she's 9. So this happens, certainly. But in all of these kids, again, sexual abuse or some kind of abuse is already going on in the home, and we did not intervene in this critical moment. And so by the time they are trafficked, it's a byproduct of a lot of other things that have gone wrong. Same as strip clubs. People think they're harmless. I can tell you I can't even count, actually, how many kids we've had in our program that were in a strip club when they were 14 and 15 years old, dancing. It's a gateway to what's coming next, essentially. They're not harmless. So it's little kids. A friend of mine had a little one in her program that I believe was only 4 years old and had gonorrhea at 4 years old. And her grandma was selling her. So it happens. All ages, all races, all colors, all
skin tones, all lengths of hair, all eye color.
Exactly. I mean, we've had kids, so that's a really great point that you bring up. People think that it's a certain kind of kid in a certain kind of neighborhood that's being trafficked. Absolutely not true. We actually work with a judge in Denver, and he is a judge that focuses strictly on sex crimes against kids. His dad was a prominent physician, emergency room doctor, I believe, and his dad was his trafficker. And this kid would go into the emergency room having rectal bleeding and all kinds of horrible things, but no one did anything because his dad was a physician. So we've seen both. We've seen a situation where dad cheated on mom with a much younger girl, and daughter's like, oh, I'm going to get my dad back and I'm going to go date an older guy. An older guy is a pimp. This stuff happens, and it happens quickly. So it can happen in any neighborhood. It doesn't matter. We've seen 7-figure household incomes where this happens, and then, people on unemployment where it's happening. So it doesn't discriminate. Vulnerability does not discriminate. Neither does exploitation.
We're talking mostly here about sex trafficking and sex slavery, but I know that's really only one part of this entire industry. What else are these kids being trafficked, bought, sold for?
Well, we also do see there's plenty of labor trafficking, which, statistically, again, labor trafficking occurs far more frequently than sex trafficking, but we're hyper focused on sex trafficking.
Is that also a domestic issue as well, or is that something you're seeing more?
Oh yeah. I mean, we have migrant workers. I mean, in our state, we have migrant workers. I'm assuming that just about any place has migrant workers, depending on the produce that's being grown at that time. So yeah, there's labor trafficking, and I mean, and even if you don't think that there's labor trafficking in your state, what coffee are you drinking? What chocolate are you eating? If you want to put a massive dent in human trafficking, you can do that today by examining your consumer habits. And I tell everyone that all the time. It's the easiest, most powerful thing we can do is to examine what we're consuming. The coffee that you're drinking, is it fair trade coffee? The chocolate that you're eating, is it fair trade chocolate? You want to make sure of those things. If everybody demanded fair trade items, we wouldn't have a labor trafficking problem. But we don't, because we want the cheapest thing possible. But there's always I always say this is a high cost to the low price generally.
High cost to the low price. Wow.
Yep.
Is there a resource where people can go for this type of information? Like, is there one general hub, or is it kind of, because I want to make things, in a case like this, like we need to make it as easy for people as possible. Yeah.
It's called slaveryfootprint.org. So slaveryfootprint.org, you can go on, it's a little questionnaire, but it will ask you about just consumer habits in general. It's totally anonymous, so you don't have to put your name or your phone number or anything in there. And it will tell you on average how many slaves you have working for you. And just to give you an idea, I think the first time I did it, I had over 40 different people that were being exploited to support my consumer habits. And that's clothing that I was wearing, brands that you're wearing, electronics that you're using, things that we don't even think of. I mean, honestly, I never thought of electronics as being one of those things, but it can be. So, and the coffee and chocolate are huge. So,
not to throw any big brands or people's favorites under the bus, and if you don't want to share it here, I completely understand. But is there any, right off the top of your head, like that, like a well-known company or brand that?
I mean, Nestle seems always to be having issues. So I remember our offices, we used to get our water delivery was from Nestle, and they were implicated in some massive labor trafficking issue. The same thing has happened to them at some point with cocoa. And so they're not a fair trade company. You can go and research these companies. What are your labor standards? Are they fair trade? What are you doing? So where there's smoke, there's fire, to me anyway. And it seems, again, a lot of the time to be large chocolate manufacturers and coffee manufacturers. There's actually a documentary that I watched once, and it makes me want to cry even now thinking about it. But they showed these people that were being trafficked in a cocoa farm, and they'd been trafficked in this cocoa farm for, I don't know, like 25 years, and none of them have even tasted a piece of chocolate before. And so, I mean, these people, 25 years of their life working 20-hour days so that we can just consume as much chocolate as we want, they had never even tasted a piece of chocolate before. And that was so, I don't know, that changed my consumer habits really quickly. So.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah. Sorry.
So parents out there, they're looking, they're looking for signs. Like they're like, I get it, Tasha, I'm in. Like, so what are some, what are things that parents could look for maybe with their own kids as far as warning signs? You just the social media thing, like just be aware of who's following your kids, who your kids talking to. But are there signs that they could see both with the kids and then also in environments and settings? Every kid's like, and it's luckily now, like things are opening back up. Kids' calendars these days, like they're stacked. It's right. Tuesday's dance, Wednesday's gymnastics, Thursdays football, Fridays swim, Saturdays 14 hours at the ball field, Sunday is church and then brunch. Like, so we're constantly on the go, and like you said, like this is happening right like underneath our own eyes. So what are some signs we could look for from the kid as far as like if they're being pursued or maybe they're engaging in some of these conversations, but then in public or in some of these environments, like what are things that parents should be on the lookout for?
Look, I would always be very mindful of the people that are going out of their way to get to know your children. So this can be in a gym setting. This can be your child's working at a local coffee shop and the same individual always comes in and is sitting at their table. So be, one of the best things that any of us can do in general is listen. Listen, don't hear, listen. And so listen to your kids. Is there someone's name that keeps coming up repeatedly? How do they know this person? How does this person know your child? Looking for items that maybe your children have, and I'm not saying looking, don't go do a room search or something crazy, but being mindful of things that your children have that you did not purchase. So if your children have an item that you did not purchase, that's a huge sign, a huge red flag, because where did they get said item? So I would look for that, and then look for even subtle changes in their behaviors. I know this can be a tough one with teenagers because their behaviors change daily sometimes, but just subtleties. Parents know more than they think they know in their gut. Trust your gut. You know more than you think that you know. So talking to children, seeing if they have anything they shouldn't have, and then changes in behavior. Are they skipping school? Are they tired? Are they wearing weather inappropriate clothing is another big one for us. So you'll start seeing this now that I'm telling you. It's 90 degrees outside today. Go for a drive down Nebraska or any of these places that are sort of notorious for trafficking and see how many kids are walking around with sweatpants on, like it's snowing outside. Conversely, if you're somewhere and it's freezing cold, why are those kids half naked? So weather inappropriate dress is generally a big one. Kids that are covering up.
The cover up would be to hide abuse marks or you mentioned tattooing of.
Yep, branding happens frequently, which we are very careful with this. Obviously, people get tattoos. Doesn't mean they're a trafficking victim. I just got my first tattoo. Thank goodness I'm not a trafficking victim, but look for things, barcodes, money signs, the word daddy. Pimps often like to be referred to as daddy. So money symbols, barcodes, QR codes, the word daddy, or a name. And usually if it's somebody that's being exploited, the name is going to be prominent because this is this pimp's property essentially. So be mindful of those things.
They're not even hiding it. They're putting it right out there. Like,
oh yeah, so that other pimps know that basically those kids are spoken for. Yeah.
I think just piggybacking off of what you started with there, it's having relationships with your children though, so that you can have these conversations and that they're comfortable in a case where there's something that they need to share with you. They're comfortable enough with you to do it. I see so many kids like and I understand, like I don't understand because I'm not a parent, but I could assume it's obviously just so easier to say, here's this iPad, like go entertain yourself, or it's your 10-hour workday and it's like I just want to come home and have dinner and then do my own thing. And it's like, no, you got to be so tapped in, and it starts with having relationships with your kids. Well, it's got to start from an authentic standpoint. Like you got to be living your life under your values and in line with who you want to be. But secondly, you got to connect with kids. One thing I heard you talk about, and I want to have you share it here as well. I heard you talk about it with Brian on the Strong by Design, was words that we use or avoid using with younger kids, and how this can prevent the kid from bringing things to your attention out of shame.
Right.
So
one of the things that we talk frequently about is the anatomy of children, right? And so if you are uncomfortable telling your daughter that she has a vagina, and some of you just gasped, I can hear it, or that your son has a penis, that is problematic. And if you have all these little cute nicknames for the anatomy of your children, which most of us grew up that way, right? Like I didn't grow up in a home where my parents were like, well, girls have vaginas and boys have penises. I think I would have been horrified potentially by hearing that come out of my parents' mouths. But what happens is if we don't collectively teach children the proper names of their anatomy, because that's what it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
We don't find cute little names for your nose or your hands or your arms, but we find all these little strange nicknames for penises and vaginas. And so what happens is we're inadvertently teaching children shame about those parts of their body. And if somebody now touches them in this shameful place, do you think they're going to tell you? No, because this is a secret place. This is this place that we, created as this shameful place. So I think I told you this when we were at lunch, but a friend of mine, she's been working with her little boy on this, and making sure he knows the correct anatomy and it's not a shameful place. And so I went over to their house one day, and as soon as I come in, he's like, Aunt Natasha, I have a penis. And he drops his little pants down. And so again, which is wonderful and great that he's not ashamed that he has a penis, but I had to watch my reaction in that situation. So if I would have been like, oh my goodness, you need to put, pull your pants up, and what would I have done? And these are little subtleties for kids, but I would have, even though his mom's teaching him no shame, I would have. And I said, high five, buddy. That's so awesome that you have a penis, but we don't just like take our pants off and announce that, you know what I mean? And he understood. But so again, just having these conversations with your kids, because if you don't have them, I promise you, if something happens, they are not going to tell you. They're not going to tell you because it's a secret, shameful place. So it's good if you teach your kids that it's a special place, right? But not that it's a shameful secret place that doesn't even have a name. It's objective.
Yeah, and I know everybody hearing this is familiar with the Jeffrey Epstein case. I've done quite a bit of looking at. I'm actually reading Trafficking right now, and this is something that you hear all of his victims come out and say. It's like, when they were 16, 15, and he's bringing them over to his place in Palm Beach. It's like, he touched me here, and I knew it was bad, but I didn't go and say anything because of the shame. So I mean, like, and these are older girls. They were 16, 17, right. Some of them, but even they didn't feel safe enough to go.
And that's a teenager. Now imagine a little child. They're not going to say anything. And yeah, the other thing too is that you bring up a point. Traffickers and exploiters and predators are very patient. They're very, very patient. So they will groom your children. So if somebody do you remember when, and I don't know if anyone in the audience's families were like this, but do you remember like you'd have like that uncle or aunt and you just like hate giving them a kiss because like their kisses was slushy or they, whatever, just like gross, and your parents be like, go give, auntie so-and-so a kiss, and you'd be like, oh, but she's smells like coffee, and whatever the case is. To me, that's also a boundary issue. If your children do not want to kiss someone a hello, they don't want to hug them a hello, don't force them. Because then when somebody else comes along that they also don't want to hug and kiss and touch, and somebody does that to them, they're going to think, well, I have to because it's an adult. And in our family, when an adult wants to give you a hug or a kiss, you give them a hug or a kiss. Don't force your kids to do it. If they woke up on the wrong side of the bed and they don't want to give you a hug or a kiss today, they don't have to. Why do they have to? So we have expectations from children a lot of the time that we don't even have from adults. You know what I mean? Like, we're not in a good mood every day. I don't want to hug you every day. But we expect kids to go give that person a hug. Go give your teacher. How many times do I hear that a day? Go give your teacher a hug. Well, if they want to hug the teacher, they can hug the teacher. You know what I mean? So just be mindful of those little things. It's subtleties that are innocent, but predators use those same subtleties to harm children.
Yeah, it's like you're compressing your child's natural instincts, and right. Over time that's gonna I mean, we lose that, I feel, as we just age, and we become more aware of reality and everything. We lose some of that natural instinct, but being able to tap into kind of that youthful spirit is amazing. But no, I can so see what you're getting at there. Wow.
Well, even this is an example that might make me very unpopular amongst parents, and I apologize, but it's the same as the Santa pictures, right? So I've seen kids have full throttle meltdowns because their parents want them to sit on this strange man's lap for a photo. If your child's uncomfortable sitting on Santa's lap, why don't you sit on Santa's lap and put your child on your lap? You know what I mean? I'm serious. So if your child has a boundary, respect their little boundaries. And so what if it's that they're scared of Santa Claus's weird beard and
who
outfit?
cares if you didn't get the 3-year-old,
Right.
2020 Christmas picture? Like, who
if that's
cares?
their little boundary, and you know what? Maybe it's just because, again, they're scared of the outfit. Well, then you sit on Santa's lap and let your child sit on yours. You know what I mean? So it's like these little boundaries. Kids have boundaries, but then we blur them with our expectations from kids. And because we're even doing that inadvertently, predators use those same things. If I force you to sit on Santa's, if my mommy forced me to sit on Santa's lap and I didn't like it, why don't I have to sit on this person's lap? So just be mindful of those little subtleties of blurring boundaries. When you don't mean to, you just want the best Christmas card of all time, right? Not going to fault you for that. Be mindful of their little boundaries. Respect their little boundaries in those ways.
Yeah, and then going back to having the conversation in the body parts, I don't know what you guys had when you were growing up in school, but we had some form of sexual education. I don't think it obviously was the greatest, but it's my understanding that that's been like removed completely. Like they're not even getting any of this education in school anymore.
Right. I think it depends on the school, right? If it's a public school, a private school, a faith-based school, not a faith-based school. But kids get very little of this education, and the education that they are getting that I've seen would alarm me. So that's another growing trend that I think parents need to be very well aware of, is this massive push for the sexual rights of children.
Yeah, I stumbled across the CSE, Comprehensive Sexual Education. I'm not sure if I'm okay.
Oh, yes, I know what that is. Yeah.
I don't want to open.
And it's abhorrent, honestly, and it was so hard to read. I have not even finished read that entire report. And so for parents listening, the United Nations released a report in May, I believe, of this year, and it's about childhood sexual education, and it is absolutely and utterly so disgusting that it's hard to read. And this is what they want to adopt as standards in education for children, in schools, with pediatricians. And I mean, encouraging masturbation in little children is just not okay with me at all. So I don't think it's okay with many parents, but there's a huge push for the sexual rights of children. And if you've seen the ridiculous Netflix show, the Cuties show, that's basically how they're defending the narrative. It's a coming of age drama, and also be mindful of the fact, I don't know if parents have noticed this, but do you notice how they're calling 11-year-olds adolescents and 10-year-olds adolescents? If you look up the word adolescence, an adolescent is someone that's transitioning from a child to an adult. So tell me how mainstream media, and it's everywhere now that I'm telling you this, adolescents. You think they're talking about a 16-year-old, they're talking about an 11-year-old. So be mindful of that. Why is that a bad narrative? Because if you're talking about an 11-year-old and not a 17-year-old transitioning from a child to an adult, that is a dangerous narrative. That narrative, coupled with this sexual rights of children narrative, it's disastrous, I promise you.
Yeah, like I told you before we started recording, I mean, I made a statement on last week's episode here about that, and I'm not encouraging anybody to go and watch it if it's something you decide to do. I mean, you guys are all grown individuals and you have the right to do that. I saw 3 scenes, which was enough for me to determine that that is not a movie that needs to be shown, at least needs to be seen by me. And I don't care what the intent of the film was or what message you were trying to get across. It could have been done without showing some of what I saw, and I'll kind of just leave it at
well, I mean, it's a total cop-out. So my response to that, honestly, was I don't have to watch pornography to familiarize myself with the storyline to know that it's harmful. I don't care what the storyline is. The content is harmful, period. Yeah. That's all I care about.
Yeah, well, going back to understanding the neuroscience of the brain and how pathways are connected and developed in your brain, like watching this over and over and accepting it, like, is only going to desensitize you to the point where when you see something that is actually of harm, you're going to be like, that's actually what I just saw in the movie. And it's slowly going to desensitize you to where some of the things that we shared here at the beginning are just going to kind of be commonplace, and not to turn this into completely different, different direction of the conversation, but the agenda behind it all, it's just.
Well, it's the sexual rights of children. That's the agenda, because you'll see there's a massive growing movement, and it's growing very, very quickly, and it's called virtuous pedophiles, which I don't know how the word virtuous and pedophile can be used in the same sentence. They call themselves virtuous pedophiles. They call themselves minor attracted persons. And basically, they're shaming society and saying, pedophilia is a natural sexual affinity, just like anything else is. We can't help who arouses us, but we wouldn't actually do anything because they can't consent. So do you see how dangerous this is? Not because they think it's wrong, because they can't consent. And then we have this massively growing movement of the sexual rights of children. So what do you think is going to happen next? And they're already doing this in some places. They're trying to change the age of consent. These are very dangerous narratives, very dangerous narratives. The sexualization of children, the sexual rights of children, and all these pedophiles that are just so virtuous and wouldn't do anything because the kids can't consent. Not because they think it's wrong, because of the age and it's illegal. That's why. And so again, if you have kids that are in dance, I've been ranting about dance moms on Lifetime for 3 years now. It's the same kind of thing.
I was discussing with that show. I feel like it's been around for a decade now, but I was dating a girl back when it first came out. And I'm like, this is, first of all, she's a nut job. The coach, like, she's a complete wacko. Right. But just what they were doing, like, I can remember this from like almost 10 years ago.
We actually made a video, and this was in 2017, and I think it got like 7 or 8 million views, this video. But it was a snippet of the instructor telling the little girls, you want the audience to think you're naked. So they were literally dressed in like nude leotards. And the way that she was teaching the dance is you got to say, you can't have me, you can't afford me. I mean, who says this to little girls? And then parents, there's so much pressure on parents. I feel so horrible because parents feel very alone. We've had a lot of parents reach out to us with this whole cutie situation because their kids are in dance. And a lot of moms are reaching out because there's so much judgment. They don't know how they should feel. They don't know how they shouldn't feel. But if they're all reaching out, they're obviously not feeling so great about what their kids are being exposed to, right? But they're too afraid to speak up. If you are not comfortable putting on the same outfits that somebody put on your child, don't let them wear it. Don't let them wear it. I asked the mom the other day, and I wanted this response. I said, why wouldn't you wear what your child is wearing? Is it because you're going to look like a rubber ducky and everyone's going to laugh at you? Why won't you wear it? It was a very revealing outfit. Why won't you wear it? And the mom's first response, and this is not this mom's fault, this is all of us. Our conditioned response is, oh, I don't have the body for that. Listen to what you just said. Listen to the conditioning of your response. You just said you wouldn't wear an outfit that your 6-year-old is wearing because you don't have the body for it. Listen to that. And it's a conditioned response, and we don't even realize it. Like, I don't have the body for that. Oh, but your 6-year-old does? Listen to what you just said. And this is not this poor mom's fault. I wanted that response because it's a conditioned response. You know, if you are uncomfortable shaking your bum in front of the PTA at school, why are you letting your little one do it? It's not cute. And so, again, it's just, there's so much coming at parents at one time. But if you are uncomfortable, ask yourself why you're allowing it then for your child.
Yeah, I feel like we need to do a whole nother conversation on just the parenting, and there needs to be an organization out there that creates content and is doing education, and I think I know somebody that's really equipped to create something like this. So you know, when we spoke a few weeks back and we were talking about having this conversation, I asked you if there was anything that you've just blown us away with all of this, but we haven't even addressed like your number one concern from a few weeks ago when I asked you like what is hot that you want to talk about right now. And it was, I think you phrased it as the myths around child trafficking or sex slavery. And obviously we all live with social media and Facebook, and sometimes people think that if they see a post and it fires them up and they quickly hit the share button, that they're doing so much great because they're bringing awareness to it. But what you were telling me is, and it's actually can work against what we're trying to do here. So can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah. So I'm sure everybody saw that. If you're on any kind of social media, if you're alive, I'm sure you saw there was a meme that went around as an example that 39 children were found in a double wide trailer in Georgia, but no one's talking about this.
Mm-hmm.
So this
everybody
is
saw it.
Right? So this is like a total bogus narrative because 39 children were found in the state of Georgia, but it was over a 2-week period, and it was 8 different agencies that were involved in this. Why is it bad to perpetuate a narrative where I'm saying 39 children were found in a double wide trailer? Because I'm training your brain to think that kids are being transported in trailers, which I'm sure that happens, but I'm not training your brain to look at the young girl or the young boy that's in the coffee shop with the way older adults and they should be in school. So trafficking victims, especially in the United States, are often hidden in our plain sight. I was in a coffee shop one day, a local coffee shop, and there was a man with a young boy. And of course, my first instinct is, why is this boy not in school today, right? Maybe this is his grandpa, and he's playing hooky. We had an appointment or whatever, but I still found a seat close to them because I wanted to know. And sure enough, what was happening? They were negotiating a price is what was happening. And like, I live in a nice neighborhood, people. You know what I mean? Like, this was happening in the coffee shop in my neighborhood. So I had to call law enforcement to come to this. And again, if my brain was trained that kids are found in double wide trailers, I wouldn't have even flinched looking at the kid that was in the coffee shop with this older man. You know what I mean? So, and again, be mindful, not everyone that's with a young child is a pedophile or predator or a trafficker, but it didn't sit well with me. And again, so my gut, I explored it, and it was a bad situation. But yeah, be careful of the narratives that you're perpetuating, because it could hurt the children that we're trying to help. These kids are screaming their heads off in plain sight, but we're not looking at them. So be mindful of that.
Yeah, and I think I think this goes back to how I opened up. Like, what can we and what should we do? So, as we kind of bring this to an end here shortly, I want to give you an opportunity to direct people in whatever way they feel pulled. But there's going to be a lot of people that hear this. They saw the post or they have been sharing some stuff, but now they're ready to like take the next step. They're ready to get involved. Obviously, we're going to link them up with the Community Alliance here locally in Hillsborough County, and I'll try to pull as many resources for you guys. Before we release this, I'll be working with Natasha to get all these links for you guys, and it'll be down there in the show notes. But if somebody they're hearing this and they're like, all right, we're ready. We want to be a bigger voice than just somebody that's hitting share on Facebook, because guys, as much as you probably think you're doing, realizing like you're in this little like bubble in Facebook, and probably the only people that are even going to see your posts are the ones that are sharing it themselves anyway. So you're not really having the impact that you probably think you're having by doing that. But that doesn't mean that you can't have an impact and you can't get involved. So if somebody's ready, like how do they get in touch with you, or how do they support what you're doing, or what are some of the best places for people to at least get their foot in the water here? Because
Gosh, so I think, first of all, for anyone that's listening, especially if you're still listening, thank you, because that's a lot more than anyone was doing a decade ago. We didn't even have a captive enough audience to deliver a message like this for 10 minutes. So the fact that people are listening, I appreciate that a lot. And on behalf of the children that we serve, thank you for that. Also, everyone can do something, right? No one can do everything. Everyone can do something. And you actually said it earlier when you talked about parents having relationships with their kids. So in all things, relationship is the ultimate intervention. Think about things in your own life, whether it was a friend or a mentor or a partner. Relationship is the ultimate intervention, and it's powerful with our kids. And so I would encourage people, in whatever capacity you can, is to be in relationship with these kids. So Big Brothers Big Sisters, that's a national program. The Guardian Ad Litem program, I'm a huge advocate of this program.
I filled out the info. I'm
Did you?
waiting to hear back from them. They sent me the initial response, the first response email, but I haven't heard back from them. So I need to follow up with them.
Yes. Well, thank you for doing that. It's really, if I wasn't doing the work that I was doing, I would 100% be a Guardian Ad Litem. It's such a powerful position to have in a child's life. You get to actually advocate on behalf of the child's best interest in court. So you can really change the trajectory of a child's life. So in mentorship capacities, you can do it. And then also just educating yourselves, right? So you listen to this today, educate yourselves. If you are part of moms groups, if you do wine Wednesdays or whatever you're doing, PTAs, is having this conversation with other parents, with other groups. If you're a man and you are listening to this, which I'm so happy to be on shows that have largely male audiences, because we need you. We need good, strong men to be in this fight with us. I was telling Frank before, when you go and you do these speaking engagements, it's always more powerful when there's a man saying, you know what, guys, this is a problem, and we can be a huge part of the solution. So men oftentimes are the majority of the consumers. And so it would be really cool if we had just as many men saying, no way, not on our watch. And then parents, you're doing it every day. You're raising men, right? Boys that are going to grow up into men that are not going to sexualize girls and objectify girls. And hopefully you're doing the same thing with your daughters and teaching them their worth. But then beyond all those things, sure, there's organizations that you can get involved with. It might be that you don't have a lot of time, but you have financial resources. Maybe those organizations have a needs list. They need toiletries, they need clothing, they're starting to collect Christmas gifts for Christmas. They need things to celebrate birthdays, So just seeing what organizations are there and what the needs list of those organizations are. But there's so many ways that you can help. You can pack toiletry bags, for goodness sakes. It all matters. We had an organization once that donated a bunch of teddy bears. Another organization that donated a bunch of toiletry packages they put together. Someone else that donated backpacks, and we made these little packages for kids when they first came in. And so it all matters. We've had somebody donate a bunch of pajamas because our kids have never had their own pair of pajamas. So, there's so many things that you can do. Don't underestimate the size of your contribution. Our little pinky finger is just as important as any other part of our body. And so that's your contribution. It's important no matter what it is.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
So here as we come to an end, this has just been it's been a dark conversation. I mean, I think we've tried to bring light into an area that not a lot of people do talk about, but I'm just curious, as we're here and coming to the final quarter of 2020 and then moving into 2021, what is Natasha and Redefining Refuge? Just excited is maybe not the best choice of words, but what are you just kind of looking forward to the rest of 2020 and 2021?
Gosh, well, that's a loaded question that I wasn't ready for. Look, the reason that you keep doing the work is the amount of resiliency that we see in our kids, right? So kids are resilient. They're amazing. They're going back to school. They're getting their normalcy back. So we're definitely looking forward to journeying with them on that. And then I think for us as an organization, we want to be more proactive in our approach, right? We've been very reactive. We're reacting to a horrible problem. We're getting kids that have already been exploited, but what can we do as an organization to make sure that this exploitation doesn't even happen? And so we're very excited about branching out in that direction, I think, is the prevention education component. And that's where we need all of you. We need you for those things. We need you to help us scale this message to everyone so that less and less of this happens.
Guys, yeah, and one of the easiest ways to do that is you've stuck around, you've heard this, you've listened to this, you're aware and familiar now. Start by sharing this conversation. Start by sharing all of the sites that Natasha, that I'm going to link down there below. But before we go, Natasha, I just once again, I want to thank you for everything that you're doing. I want to acknowledge you for just, like researching you and preparing for this, it made me question, what the hell am I doing with my life?
Oh,
but
no,
I want to thank you for just your willingness back in 2018 or 2008 to raise your hand and question, question it from the beginning. And then, I want to, acknowledge your persistence at the beginning, when it wasn't well received at the beginning. And I just am so incredibly thankful that we got connected when we did. And I'm looking forward to a long lasting relationship and whatever that looks like, together moving forward. I think that there's going to be some incredible impact and things that come out of this. So I'm really, really excited about that. One thing, and this is gonna go in a completely different direction, this entire conversation, but we end every episode with the same question. Obviously, the mission behind the show and what we're trying to do here. It is about, helping men break free from porn addiction. And for me, living a superhuman life, people ask me to define it. And in my eyes, it's really about my belief system and how I've, tried to align things in my life. So, I shared with you my story and what ultimately has led me to creating this podcast. But I did 35 years of kind of running solo and, doing things on my own, feeling that I was the one that was making all decisions and was creating my own path. And it wasn't until I really, partnered with the best partner in life and started to put God first in everything that I do, that I ultimately understood what it meant to create a superhuman life. So I end every episode with asking the guests, how would they define living a superhuman life?
Gosh, I think the same way as you. I don't think we get to be superhumans without holding the hand of God through every single step that you take. You'll know when you start to do things in your own strength and when you are doing things with the most powerful, awesome, fun creator of all time. I've told you, I had a very traditional sort of view of God. And then throughout this experience, imagine this God saying, hey, leave your finance job and come do this thing with me. I got to know God in such a cool way. And Yeah, just completely out of the box. So I think to have a superhuman life, you got to let God be God, and you got to take God out of a box, and you can't think that you know who God is, because I learn every day that I have no idea, and it just gets cooler and cooler and cooler. And I could never do what I've done without God. There's no way, nor would I want to either. So yeah, it's fun. It's been fun. It's been hard, but it's been fun.
Powerful. Well,
Yeah.
you are, in my eyes, you are a superhuman. You are a superhero.
Oh.
So thank you for everything that you're doing. And any last final, words here for
Yes, we
everyone?
are thankful for the men that are showing up. I am your biggest cheerleader over here. I cannot tell you how grateful I am to you for having us on the show. I know a lot of men just feel very uncomfortable with the subject. Men are doers and fixers, and they want to just go be an assassin like Liam Neeson and take all these people out. But we appreciate you so much for showing up. I wish I could show the kids in our program that there's even one man. All I can see is the face of Frank right now, but that there's one really cool man that's sitting here because he cares about them, and he doesn't even know them, and he doesn't want anything from them. That is so powerful. And so for all the men that are listening, that goes for you too. Like, you are showing up for kids that you don't even know, and that is so, so, so powerful. And we just appreciate you, and we can't wait for you guys to rally the troops and just continue to come alongside us in this whole fight.
Yeah, we're building an army, guys, here in the Tampa Bay area. But I empower and encourage each and every one of you out there, whatever city, state, Providence, country you're listening to this from. Like, as we said, this is not an isolated problem. It's happening everywhere to everybody. So if you need some help and you need some guidance and finding the right people, reach out to me. I'm like, I share with you guys every single episode. You have my email, you have my Instagram. Like, I reply to every single message sent my way. And I don't always have all the answers, but I got somebody in my corner that does. So if you're looking,
not all, I'm learning too, but I have some.
We'll find them if we need
Yeah.
them. But if you guys are serious about getting involved and you don't know where to get started, reach out to me, because we are looking for men. I have a handful of guys here locally that we're already starting to have these conversations with. So I'm just, like I said, I keep coming back to the word excited, but I don't think excited is the right word. So, but you guys get the point there. So thank you once again, Natasha. Thank you, everybody, for being with us today, for giving us your time. I know we went longer than usual here, but we could have gone for 5 more hours. We'll probably have Natasha on at some other point, but guys, if you're looking to get involved, like I said, it starts with sharing this episode. Hit the links in the description. But that's it, guys. I'm not going to draw this out any longer. We thank Natasha for giving us her time and bringing her expertise here. And yeah, guys, don't wait, take action. But we love you all, and we'll see you next week.